I'm sure that course, the research course will really cool. But as part of business decision making, you have to know how to present the report for management, right? So we are teaching you on how to gather the data, and the data, secondary data, and how to analyze the data. All of that will be your methodology. Type of sampling, we did type of sampling, we did random sampling, cluster sampling, systematic. So that was quantitative analysis. We also do the other type, opposite sampling, snowball, photons, or quantity. We did that in one of the classes. The findings usually the bulk of the report, right? This is you have the data now and you're analyzing the data. In terms of the analysis of the data, we have shown you some techniques: descriptive analysis and inferential analysis. Right? You need to know when to use that. Descriptive analysis is usually used for qualitative reports. Descriptive and inferential analysis for quantitative. Right? The descriptive analysis include presentation, which we will look at the presentation of the findings, and we look at how you can do that, graphs, charts, tables, and so on. And we also look at how you can use Excel to help people to get those graphs and change the table presentation, change the graphics, the labels, and so on. We cover those, and then give you YouTube stuff to look at, right? So this is the bulk of the report. And based on these findings, within a qualitative report, you will generate the themes and present that. If you're doing quantitative, you use your inferential analysis. Inferential analysis starts with independent and dependent variable, hypothesis, right? Then you test the hypothesis using some kind of, and then you either accept or reject and make your decision. Eventual that you want to do. Yeah. So all that is how you report your findings, right? And from these findings, you come to conclusion. These conclusions will be based on the objectives that you started out. Um, what did you start? What are you writing to project on? Right? Conclusion will be based on that. And then based on this conclusion, you have to provide a recommendation. Because, for example, if you're doing this research for a company, then they want your recommendation to introduce as policy, right? So if you're working in a marketing company or you're subcontract a marketing company, the marketing company asks you to go and do a survey of its customers or or whatever customer target um, population that you want to compare. You come from what recommendation can you give us in terms of presenting a market strategy, right? So let's say they ask you to look at how what's the recent group Gen Z, Gen Z is the younger group, Generation Z, right? They're questioning for, let's say they're talking about maybe perfume or clothing or gear. They're saying that they want you to do a research on that. So then you will go out, you will select a sample for these people, you will interview them, right? And then based on the interview, you come to these guys and say, listen, this is the question pattern for this group of people. They focus on buying more of these kind of glamorous stuff, meals and gear and whatever you find. So then you have to make sure that yeah. Now, when you're writing up your findings, when you're writing up your literature review, when you're writing up your methodology, when you're writing up your background, you will be, you're supposed to be citing the sources, right? That you are referring to that help you write those sections. right? And once you cite those, you have to have a record, right? When you presented the report, you may have a lot of graphs and charts, right? You don't put everything inside your report. You may selectively place some graphs in the reports and charts, and then you refer to the appendix, where you have most of the other graphs, right? Because these are really to support the findings, right? So let's see, we know some of these charts, you're just gonna do some additional. So once we come to the stage where you're interpreting your findings, right? These triangles that must be based on your objectives and what you have stated in the background. You know, in the background, you would have said, okay, this research will be looking at X, Y, and Z. This is the objective or the aim. Findings must be based on that. That's what you start, that's what you try to do, right? So the research objective and background would serve as a guide for interpreting the findings and drawing your conclusion. When you draw a conclusion, you can't pull it out of thin air. It must be based on what you know, right? And so when you're looking at your results, your findings, you're looking to find results that relate to your objective, right? So if you start with this objective, because the people you pay most likely pay money to do the research, then, right? So you may be working in a marketing firm, right? So you want the results. Let's say they ask you to look at the purchasing pattern of Gen Z in Toronto, right? You go and get the population guide, how many Gen Z in Toronto. You select, you can't do everybody, so you select a sample, right? You look at the different districts in Toronto, and you select. Once you know the amount of people, you want to select a sample, 2% from here, 5% from here, to get a representation. Once you have your survey, which is your questionnaire, which you have developed relating to what you want to investigate, you want to get the information in primary source. You could also have done secondary sources. So you look at any companies that would have provided these, and they have by patterns of Gen Z in Toronto. You may have that, right? Or maybe in a wider report that they have. In other words, the secondary database. Find the secondary database, pull the information on their report, right? And then the conclusion. Now, based on the conclusion, you're going to make generalizations, right? But these generalizations can only be made if you're doing quantitative analysis, right? If you're doing qualitative analysis, you can't make generalizations. Yeah. Because as we saw, how you choose those samples, right? So valid, but if I interview you and say, by the way, you know who else can give me information on this topic? And you say, yes, I know she did. You send me the, that's not scientific, right? There's something. So you can't make generalization. The generalization you can make is related to where only the place you got the thing, right? And formulating the recommendations, right? This is where you're going to apply your conclusion. For example, if you look at market strategy or tactics that focus on client achievement of competitive advantage, then your recommendations focus on that. So in other words, you can't recommend something that's not a conclusion, that's not flowing from the conclusion of your research. Okay? So that's basically the structure of your report and some of the content, right? There may be slight variation depending on the type of research you're doing, right? And the type of report means how your client will guide what you produce. your client being now, of course, who hire you to do the research. The company that hires you will come to that. So, in your report, most likely, whether you're doing qualitative or quantitative, you want to nice up the report by setting graphics. Because remember, we said that tables, graphs, and so on allow you to simplify the data, and it's easy on the eyes. You can read the data, the results, right? So graphs in reports are used to present the research efficiently and effectively. So a graph, right, tells you a picture, say a lot more than how it works, right? Once you present it properly, right? And it is only used though when appropriate. And when you write in a report, you write in an essay, um, if you're presenting the findings and you're using a picture or a graph or something, must come immediately after you write, right? So you will say something like figure 10 present results which indicate X, Y, and Z. You need to present figure 10 very close to that analysis. Because if you put it way down the back, then can't research it. Right? And you can read, the articles that stuff that you are reading for this course and see where if they use graphs and so on, where they put it, right? So you want to include some graphs and charts. Um, and most likely, if you're hired or you work in a company, right, and you did some research, you have to present it, right? Um, Depending on the type of research you did, um, you will have different parts. So if you work in a marketing company and you're in a marketing arm, you may have to present it to your colleagues, right? Or you may have to present it to the CEO, or you may have to present it to a group of experts. So when you're doing a research presentation, you consider providing hard copies of your report to your audience. Who's going to be many of you have attended conferences, no? Right? And they will give you handouts, right? Uh, Related to the conference. When you're doing your presentation, you have to tailor it to your audience, right? So if you're doing a presentation, and let's say you did a scientific um, research, and your audience is not scientific audience, then you need to break it up, right? Have to break down the presentation. Right? In the morning class, I had again somebody who's in dentistry, right? So if she is doing a research on dentistry, and she look at periodontitis or gingivitis, right? How those things can be put if she's presented to an audience that understand that, right? And tell people. When she is presented to people who don't know that, then she will have to explain those terms, right? So instead of gingivitis, she may want to say stuff that affect your gums. That is so. You understand? So depending on audience, you have to break down how you do your presentation. You also need to allow time for discussion and questions, right? In this class, I usually ask you if you have a question, right? If you are doing a presentation, discussion, you'll have to leave time at the end or in between. So, because when I'm doing my online presentation or even I will pause and ask you if you have a question, right? At the end, if there's time for you to ask it. Similarly, when you're doing your presentation, you have to allow time for discussion to happen, for people to ask questions, right? You have web options when you're doing your presentation, like how we're doing teaching, right? You can use your Teams, you can use Google Meet, you can use Blackboard, collaborate, this one different. web option to do your presentation. We saw in the qualitative primary data collection, we could have used online interviews, right? Now that web option collect data. But remember, we also said you can have focus group, right? In the focus group, we bring a set of people here, we have a discussion, right? Um, what is the decision maker problem that prompt client to have the research conducted? In your research presentation, you have to make sure that this you start out, this is prominent. What problems did you research or problem did you research? Yeah. And that would, of course, be what they asked you to do, right? What do the data mean and what answers do they provide for the client decision? So this is your findings. Present your data in a discussion in terms of your findings. Well, we conducted the analysis and we looked and we found the mean of this, the standard deviation of what does that mean? How does that help your client, right? In terms of the problem that they're trying to make their decision. If average consumer income on what you guys call it, the nails and the hairs, what we call it, or humans of cosmetics. uh, Average consumer spending in this age bracket, right? For a week, or for a month, or for a year, as you have done the research, which is the mean, right? Is X with a standard deviation of Y. You can't present a mean without a standard deviation. So you may want to say, okay, we found that medium income, because median income might be better than the average. But this group, right, was X, Y, and Z, and they purchased on average 20%. 20% they use monthly to buy things and nicer cosmetics and so on, right? With a standard deviation of it. So then the client now understand, right, that the income that these guys set aside for cosmetics is 20% of their monthly income, for example. So then they're going to put out ads to target that group, so that group can buy from them. You understand? So in your research presentation, what is data, what you're finding mean, and how to assist in problem solving. And therefore, what are the concrete recommendations based on findings? You must present your recommendation. That's the reason why you research, right? So if you're a big time consultant, right, or if you know start in research, for example, you want to make recommendations that company can use, right, to improve their, because most all the time they want sales, right? So a sales recommendation. One recommendation might be that listen, you did when you look at your analysis, you look at the Gen Z and you look at the other group. What's the other group? There's no for this group. And they change like I can't remember exactly. They have baby boomers, they have millennials, right? And then they have Gen Zs. And they have another one now. Right?
Betas, yeah.
That's what we call them. Yeah. So then suppose you collect data for the Gen Z and the millennials. When you look at the data, you realize that you know what? These Gen Z guys not really interested in fashion and so on. You know. All they want is party, right? But the millennials still buying more, um, you know, traditional stuff, clothing and so on and so on. So then your recommendation will be target the millennium, right? And the data shows that these guys are spending their money buying books and right? The gens. I mean, assumption that I make, they don't haven't done the research. Although it's leading to it, they spend on their money. The Gen Z guys like quick results, right? You want to rich quick, yeah, and spend quick. And then of course you have to provide some limitation of the study, right? Um, you may indicate there that your sample size was not that large, small, any limitation. Um, is for the study required, right? So let us say that you did the research on Gen Z, right? You may indicate that this research was only done on Gen Z. Further research you may need to do um, Y, the Y for the millennium or do some further research. So you suggest where the company can go, right? Um, in terms of their further research and what exactly. Maybe you did a quantitative study, but you need more of the person's perception of their own thought process. You may say, you know what, a mixed method study might be required here, where you do some qualitative, so you go into um, preferences of the consumers, and you may recommend them with some qualitative. So limitations for a study. So when you're a researcher also, and you're researching for um, clients, you have to manage the client, right? You need to know what the client wants. The client will be of course contracting, and if you're in a company situation with the company, right? What do they want when you're looking at research? They want to ensure that you are dealing with issues of confidentiality because they don't want to be sued, right? So confidentiality is key when you collect the data, what you do with it, right? Honesty, and you need to be punctual, you need to be flexible, you need to be responsive to their questions. So these are people who hire you, right? Um, they expect high quality results from you. Yeah. Um, they want you to give excellent control standards, consumer oriented approach. They want from you. And once you take on the project, they need updates, periodic updates from you. So this is the supplier management in terms of what you're supposed to do. Okay? In terms of managing the research process itself, organizing the supplier firm, uh, the quality management, time and cost management, right? Client profitability management, staff management, and so just choose one highlight. It's time and cost management. How many times have you heard that uh, people here it's rampant in Toronto and they're building project, the roads, and they go right time and over cost. Right? That will cripple the any management company or whatever who's doing the project, who they're doing the project for. So for example, I don't know if you heard if you since what almost 15, 20, 10, 15 years, 20 years, I've been trying to finish the Eglinton construction in terms of the RFLR, right? Even though they can't give the date as to when that has been over time and over managed cost management, right? You guys may be doing a project management, course project management, or it's in that class. I don't know, you can tell me which course, which specialty you do, right? The big issue, time and cost management. So similarly, when you are doing your project, if you're doing a research company, you have to have time and cost management, right? Horrendous amount of funds are waste by when you over time. and you bring in product, right? Selecting a supplier is very critical also. In other words, um, you know, researcher, and you're going to get business, right? Who are you going to get the business, right? Um, so what you would do an assessment of the company with, and they are going to be contract with you. So what kind of approach do they like, and how does it fit in your area of study? So suppose you're a qualitative researcher, right? You're not going to approach a company that uh, subcontract out quantitative type studies. You don't have that expertise. You want to find uh, companies that use the same approach as you. Similarly, if you're a quantitative type researcher, you want to make companies that are more quantitative. The size of the company, right? Size of the vendor, that's important, right? Um, Small vendors um, probably will have some weaknesses in terms of ability to pay and all kinds of stuff. Depends on what you're looking for. For large vendors, they usually have their own project team. Like let's say you want to go and join their project, right? What are the qualifications and experience you want to know that, right? As you want to play the same game. How long have they been in business? If it's a startup firm, then the type of research that they want is different from firm that's already established, right? Um, what is the clientele and the client and reference check. So you want to know who are your clients, and you want to know whether they're a good company to reference check. So just like when you're going for a job, right? Um, the company will want to know your experience, your qualifications, and then they will ask you to reference, right? Similarly, you're going to do research, you want to know whether these companies are not fly-by-night companies, right? And then, of course, key question, do they use subcontractors because you're going to them as a subcontractor, right? And what are the quality control standards? So when you're selecting supplier, meaning the supplier for you, right, or for a project, you want to right, for you, select. So that's in terms of the research report, issues associated with management of products. How you present the report, client management, supply management. Any questions there before we go on to quickly in the report some additional practical methods for describing qualitatively, and this will be hand quality. So let's look at this diagram, terms of your data presentation, right? And we have two sets of data, right? And how are you going to represent, right? So remember we covered over um, we have qualitative data, we have a summary table, and from that summary table we could have used Excel, not a bar chart or pie chart or a for that. You guys remember that, right? We had our table, from the table we could have used Excel, create bar chart, pie charts, and for right? So these are the three charts that we will use, or we can use to present qualitative table, height, and breadth, right? In terms of quantitative data, right, you can use same three, more mainly these five bar chart and breadth. We can also use a histogram. You can use a stem leaf display. You can use a dot plot. And you can use all those other things that you uh, scatter plot, correlation, right? And you can use time series, you look at time series, right? That's what briefly a dot plot. Because the dot plot really, if you look at it, it's just another way of the simplistic way of presenting your data. Each bubble will represent um, a chorus, right, of the data set. So we have horizontal axis of the scale for the quantitative variables. For example, percentage, if this was percentage here, this scale here was percentage, right? Um, 5.5% in your data occur one time. You have one bubble, one down, right? Um, 6.5 occur four times. You have two bubbles. It's just a visual presentation of this outline. So numerical value each measurement is located on the horizontal scale by a right? So this would be 3 times 10.5%. This would be 8, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times 8 occur in the data set. This is a simplistic way of doing one. Another one is a stemmer leaf. You might see this. I had a video on this, but the video link is broken, so we can't, right? But stem, you have the stem, how many times, and now the stem will have how many times the different numbers here occur in the data set. So in this situation, 9, 6, and 8 is not important, whereas 9, 7, 6, and 4 are important, right? But for you to understand this properly, you would have to look at it. The video did not play, right? If not played, tell me it's not available anymore. I will have to substitute, right? Verification, and it tells you which digit. That's right. So we have the family. Then we have, but more important is the one that I use, the histogram, right? The histogram is used especially for salaries and income and stuff, right? And so construct a histogram, you will determine the number of classes, determine the number of classes with data, and you have to have the data in terms of a data set. So let's say you're looking at this could be anything, right? So those persons who earn less than 25,000, those who earn between 25 to 50, and those who earn more than 50, right? And number of class would be 5 to 6, 7 to 14, and 15 to 20. In terms of, right? Once you have that data, then you can plot, right, in Instagram. The difference between a bar chart and a histogram is that these bars must be equal, right? And they must join together, right? A histogram is usually used for continuous data, and um, usually you use the midpoint, right, to draw your curve, your bell curve. When you connect the midpoints of the bar, you can see the other continuous distribution, and then you can make conclusion or inference from that, from the same, from this bell curve, and what we did, whether it's skewed to the left, skewed to the right, or uh, symmetric, right? So once we have our classes, right, we will look at the frequencies, right, and then we will plot on this axis, the y-axis. You can plot the count, the frequencies, in terms of percentages. absolute or percentage, right? So here we use this data and we can plot this. So in the category 15.5 to 25.5, that notice that these classes, the lower and upper classes are equal, right? The difference between 15.5 and 25.5 is 10. The difference between 25.5 and 25.5 is 10, right? So they must be equal. Same thing for the upper boundary. 25.5 or 5.5 is 10, or 5.5 or 5.5 is 10. Now note what you have to do here in the previous, right? Um, you have, you have to, you have to close this. So if you had um, more than 50, it would be 50 plus 6 plus 10 is 60, and then you divide that by, right? So close this. But we're not looking at it. So we have the frequency and we will plot it. So between 15 and 25.5, 3, you notice we will draw the bar here, right? And for a histogram, these bars must be together. Why? Because you notice 25.5 is in this class, 25.5 starts here, right? So the bar must touch. This line here must touch. That belongs to both bars. Then 5.5 to 5.5, we have 5 occurrences, right? So we have that up here. And for 5.5 to 5.5, we have 2, right? So we have 2 here. Um, Note that the axis start at 0, right? And we'll see why this is necessary. So the must is around. We have the lower boundary, we start with the lower boundaries for each one of the data sets, right? Now, before computers, you have to draw this by hand, right? But with Excel and so on, right? This is easy, right? Well, let's see if we can replicate this, right? Let me see if I can do this. Yeah. So let's highlight this. Okay, it might be so let's try this. What is the SS one? But what you would do is highlight this data set, right? Go into Excel, right? And insert, you go to Instagram, right? Right? The Instagram here, remember it? To do the Instagram, and it will give you it, right? Let's see if it will give us an Instagram using this data. It's not the appropriate data, but let's see. Insert Instagram, right? It gives you something. It doesn't have the features to it, right? Um, and I can't get to use that. But that's in terms of constructing an Instagram for your report, right? If you use an Instagram, that's how you get in terms of Excel. And so in terms of summarizing it, that plot is kind of leave on the Instagram, right? That plot, numerical value of each quantitative measure, right, in the data, which is represented by a dot on the horizontal scale, you have to get. Now when data value repeat, the dots are placed above one another vertically. So what we saw here, right? 6.5 repeated 4 times, the dots are placed. Similarly, display the numerical value of the quantitative values partition in a stem and a leaf. And the possible stem value is still in order. In a column, the leaf of each quantitative measurement is set its place in the corresponding stem row. Leaves for observation with the same stem value are listed in often increasing order horizontally. So we have this example, right? In the stem, stem. And then we have the histogram, the possible numerical values of the quantitative variable. We partition them into class intervals. So class interval that is 15, 25, that's one class. 25 to 45, the other one, and 45 to 45. So there are three classes. Right? And so these intervals will form the scale of the horizontal axis. This are here, horizontal axis here. So these are intervals. Here list the lower boundary and upper boundary. And a horizontal bar is placed over each class intervals with height equal to either the class frequency or the relative frequency. So, comes here, frequencies or percentages. Right? Now, you know, this sign here, that sign is telling you at this interval between 0, 15, right? It's not continuous. So if you want it, if you have a lot, and this, by the way, can give you error, right? So between here and here should have really been 10. You know, this is different, right? It's 15. Yeah. So we will put this to represent that this is not continuous. Not continuous. And it's perfectly how you interpret it is problematic, and we will see here. You know, and of here you don't want that break in interval on your report. Uh, That was our Instagram, and we saw that you can easily construct Instagram. I'm going back to our data presentation. We're just going to recap our charts, right? Remember this is the corrective diagram, right? For the corrective diagram, um, we have similar bars, but the categories are arranged in height in terms of descending order. And in our previous class, this representing the correct we start one of our previous. Again, how we get the correct look. Right, so here we're talking about I, sorry, I know this one. Sorry, you come back to that. This is a breakdown. Why? It's because it needs to go through. We want to analyze persons with different majors or different subjects that they pursue. Econ, management, and accounts. Right? But even if you're in business, you use all the courses. Right? And what we will do is in a pie chart show the number of um, distribution of courses in terms of majors, right? In this case here, 10% of students are pursuing economics major, 25% management, and accounts in major, right? You now have to if you are doing this manually, you have to distribute these figures in this chart accordingly. This pie chart is made about 360 degrees, right? 360 degrees pie chart. And 10% of that 360 degree is 36 degree. So you'll actually, you guys familiar in geometry, right? Yeah, protractor compass. Right? So the compass will then prescribe this chart, right? And then you take the protractor. So that's the protractor. Then you have the compass. It's a half semicircle kind of thing. Yeah. You put it there and you accurately determine 36%. You mark that management 25% of 360, 90 degrees. You mark that down. And the rest is accounts. So you clearly would represent because this thing has to be done accurately. Right? That was free. That was free software. Right? Now we have Excel, we know how to do that. Right? But the Excel, all we would do is this software. Right? But let us suppose that it's not the right data. But we did the same thing right? You do it, you want this. Okay. If you want that pie chart here, insert, go to this figure, and it's pie chart, you select, that's where you select this one is, right? You get your pie chart, right? For this data. And then what we will do is nice up the labels, right? Look at labels, how we do that. Look on the chart, this plus sign, remember? Click on that plus sign, go for the chart title, right? Click on the chart, right? Highlight it, um, let's say price, average price. So you can change the stuff, right? You can change the colors, right? Um, you can do filters. Let us say the same data, but you want it pull out chart, right? You want another chart, right? The percentages are in the chart itself, right? Right? Um, let us say you want it to insert and you want it 3D pie chart, right? You want to do a pie chart, right? Or you want pie chart and shows you there's a link, right? So you can present this thing in Excel make you able to do it very easy, right? But you need to know what it percentages represent and how Excel actually calculates it, right? Then we have um, the Pareto, which is over there. So the same data the Pareto chart, but Pareto charts are only used for certain things, right? So this Pareto chart we completely what you would have to do then from here is do the data. But this data is not really applicable. Because what a Pareto chart does, like here, for example, right? It shows you um, the composition within data, right? So we have that Pareto chart. Then we can have chart showing revenue. This is an actual real life chart from NVIDIA, right? This is a large tech company, right? And it shows its revenue from 2017 to 2024. And by looking at this chart here, you can decide on many things. You can show this is showing that the company has moved away from getting revenue from GPU and processors, they're making it hard, drive and so on. So um, concentrating in graphics and computer networking activity. And you have the different percentage each year in a stack bar, right, of the revenue. Revenue has been growing, if you look at graphics and computer, have been growing. Both sections have been growing, right? And in 2024, which is last year, right, massive increase in computer, um, computing and networking, right? In terms of the services that it offers, massive increase there. So look at they have headed in NVIDIA revenue worldwide from fiscal year 2017 to 2024 by segments, and this is the millions of years, right? So point we're making here is that when you present your report, you can enhance it. Chart, chart, chart shows the reader a lot of information rather than text, right? So in summary, we have bar charts, pie charts, and character diagram. We have looked at these previous class. Yeah, on it. Yeah. So let's quickly refresh your mind by seeing whether we can produce something. You're an analyst for a company, IRI, and you want to show the market share held by web browsers in 2023, right? So web browsers that we use Chrome. You guys are familiar with that, right? You use Microsoft Edge. You guys are familiar with that, right? Safari, right? Our good friend there, and only use Safari. As she has the high-end computer, Apple. You can't use Microsoft stuff on that, right? They give you that. You can't use Microsoft stuff on that. Okay? Okay. But it comes with Safari.
Cell phones.
So what does Apple give you? What does what
Your cell phones has Safari as an option.
as an office
Mhm.
source Safari? And then there are others. You have Firefox and others. And I think so at 2023, right? 40% market share. Microsoft Edge was 81%, right? Because Microsoft had Internet Explorer before that.
Mm,
It close business, right? Safari, people are used to. I used to use a Safari, but don't use it. The others. So we have this and we want to grab this. So you can easily grab this,
mm.
right? This is a pie chart showing that. So the visual display,
Easier to understand. Yeah.
and this is the Pareto, but this is not really the Pareto. I draw it out and to show the Pareto. And that's the bar chart. And so Chrome, Microsoft Edge, and right? So to do this, right, you will just take the data, something and hope it's not retrieved again. But let's say we have that data, let's copy it into Excel, the management project, paste in this destination, right? And then now we want insert, like right? That's the one that we, right? We want to uh, insert bar chart on the glucose, right? So the Pareto would have looked like this. And replicating that diagram, we have to just uh, copy it into here, uh, immediately. Uh, yes. Uh-huh. then I erase this, right? So I have actually done just copy and paste the parental diagram. Then we come back here. What is the other one we did? We want to do both the other diagram. I correct to and the graph, so we come here, store, not a business, but what is no, this is Instagram. No. Oh, sorry. Right? And we can have different, right? If you want stack, right? Stackable ones, 3D, right? This is the one we use, right? This is the one. Uh, it's in this PowerPoint, right? So it's easy to present this once you have the data, then place them in your presentation, right? Can also have shapes on box. So the diagrams here, right? We call the symmetrical diagram, the left skew diagram, where the mean is, the median is, where the quartiles are, right? Right skew symmetry, right? In the exam, where we ask you, the people diagram on that question, right? Same thing in the box plot. We went through all of this before, right? And question six, right? That's the type of thing you can get in an exam also, right? Get information, construct the box plot, right? And then find some stuff. What is the median? What is the interquartile range? What is the quartile? What is the first quartile? And we do question six, synchronous activity six, right? We'll be practicing very much. And then we also have other shapes that we can, all of these that you can use in your report, right? If you're doing, depending on what you're doing. So this, remember, this is correlation, right? We have a positive relationship here. We have a negative relationship here. We have no relationship, right? So in the exam, you can be given any one of these and you ask what is the so the bivariate relationship, describe the relationship between two quantitative variable and not scatter diagram. It's a scatter diagram. Of course, you have the figure also, right? The numbers. So if R equal to 25, what does that mean? R equal to minus 2.25, what does that mean? Right? So all of this can be in the presentation report, and therefore it can be related. But this is the based on class 5, class 6, right? Before we break, time series plot. We have learned this. Another type of chart that you can use and is usually used in a lot of publications, especially secondary schools, United Nations, UNESCO, and so on. Because what it does, it displays data produced over time. So it displays data over time, so time series, right? It could trend and changes the data over time. Um, Time is recorded on the horizontal axis, and the measurement is recorded on the vertical axis. And then you connect the points by a straight line. So you can actually do this manually, or now the computer is doing it. Right? Let's assume that we have the following data, right? Um, this is the one I assume we have average price of gasoline in New York for 8 weeks in 2006. Draw time series, right? This is um this is easily done, right? So this is the data, right? And this is the time series. Note what is plotted up here. Prices on this axis and the dates on the x-axis. Prices on the y-axis, right? The date is on the x-axis, right? Prices, right? Dates, right? The dependent variable is price, the independent variable is date, right? And it is this data here, right, that we use to create this chart, right? So each one of these data points, 10 between October 10, October 16, 10, the price was 2.219. So 2.219. When I thought of October, price was 2.17, 2.17 here, and that. So each dot represents a combination of axes. Um, on the 12th of this, on the 4th of December, price was 2.298, 2.298, right? So from this diagram, you can see that price have been declining, then certainly increasing towards December. Price is highest in December. Um, we can use Excel to quickly the diagram. Right? So, I like data, right? What we insert, um, we look for our line, right? And you just select any one of them. So let's say you select um, let's say exact start here over here. Yeah? You can actually put in the parts, you can label them. So Excel will give you and then again you can click on the plus sign and label it, right? Right? You can put in the dots there if you want them. It's not necessary. Right? If you want different chart, insert like this. Let's say we want a three-dimensional um, 3D line, right? Any one of these we can select, right? It's slightly different, but it gives you three dimensions rather than the single line. So you can do a lot of stuff, and then you can shape and change the color, and also just change the how the um, axes are represented. So you can take a breakdown. Um, yeah, well, that was like, so we can show you how you can just start food in this game. So you can like, you have an assignment actually,
Mhm.
how to like this. You, here we're gonna look at, maybe the continuous one. Yeah, we continue. So how do we go? How do people start uh, about the details, especially descriptive? Here are a number of ways. use area to equate value. We can use no relative data, basis in compared data patches. Actually, I give you an example. We can compress the vertical axis. Remember, I told you, you never calculate the vertical axis, but you can do it, and then you confuse. You just start it if you present it. No 0 point on the vertical axis, gaps in the vertical axis, use of misleading words, and no essential tendency, but you don't know variability. Remember I said, if you're going to present the mean, you have to present a standard deviation into that data. So where you can present, so you said average income is X, but you didn't present the standard deviation to show the variability, and therefore only half the data you presented. Yeah. Let's look at some examples where we apply some of these errors, right? So here, where you're trying to get your reader to equate area with value, right? This is a bad presentation. This is where you're trying to learn it, right? So you're using area, surface of Benjamin Franklin, right? You know what Benjamin the US dollar, right? So there you're using the US dollar here to depict minimum wage, and you're trying to show that the size of the dollar increase in terms of the show an increase in wages, right? But in good presentation is using a line graph, right? Time series graph, right? Which we already did. So 1960, 1970, 1980, and 1990. 1960 it was $1, right? Minimum wage. 1970 was 160. And so you can see the increase in minimum wage when you look at a good presentation, which is the line graph, right? Another way in which you discard the data, no relative basis in terms of the second one, no relative basis comparing the data batches that you have. So here we have, right, in this one here, you're doing the number of A's by class, right? Um, so you have the different type of class here, French, society, you know, um, the frequencies here is here, right? Notice when you present them in this format here, in terms of the basis, yeah, um, it looks as if those the French class get more A's than any other class. When you convert them in percentages, right, which is an equal base, right, you notice that all the class really receive same number of A's, right, from the percentages, right? This is a better presentation, and here you can lie with this presentation. You can see from the frequency, this uh, this class receive more A's, whereas when you put them in terms of percentages, right, percentage of received A's, because this class will receive more A's and have more people, right? Simple as that. So this is the way in which I like this. When you compress the vertical axis, this is the vertical axis, right? Um, when you're doing the question 6, right, Excel will automatically compress the axis for you, right? It is better to put the box up the axis in the horizontal rather than the vertical. When you compress the axis, right, by making these segments large, you don't get a true representation of the data. So here you look as if quarterly sales were very low in all the quarters, right? On a visual presentation. But if you if you extend out the axis, in other words, instead of each marking, instead of by 100 or 1,000, you do small amounts like 25, right? You're better able to see quarterly sales. And there you can see clearly, right? It's shown here too, right? It's shown here too, but this is a better presentation, right? So compressing the vertical axis can cause a distortion noise. This is the vertical axis. Why you compress it? In other words, the segments here are large. You're going to find the same thing with the box plot that you're going to use. You may want to extend over the axis. And then we have, and there's no 0 point on the vertical axis, right? So vertical axis start at 36, right? By starting that vertical axis, the monthly sales, you notice the type of data, type of graph, right? When you actually start the axis at 0, this is the real depiction of the data. And notice it's a completely different view. If you try to interpret this, you can look at sales were high, and then they drop drastically, and then they go up high again, right? Whereas the good representation indicate that there was a marginal decrease in sales in this area, and it actually increased here. So how you present, you can lie quite with the individual, right? Because you're lying here, right? You can see it clearly. And the analysis from here will say, okay, wait, this company is not doing good. Right? Yeah, or two, and then we drop significantly, right? Again, when you have a break in the a gap in the vertical axis, right? Like here, um, the presentation is not, it's not properly done. Because here you're starting from, so between here and here, yeah, it's the difference here is larger than here and larger than here. So each difference, each segment here represents a difference of five. Whereas you have a huge gap here and you have a break here. So if you are done 0 to 5 and move up, then this graph will be different. Yeah. Changing the type of the graph can influence your reader, right? In terms of what you can do. So you change the wording, right? So in this the same graph, right? Same graph, right? So you're saying we're not doing well here in this area. And you can be saying that production declines again. So production will decline, right? Whereas a better presentation would be that, listen, we're still um, well, by 2012 is our second best year of production, right, which is here. Our highest was 100. Instead of saying, oh, production declined now, right? This is not commenting on the actual description of this graph. The production increased, it declined, it increased, and then declined in 2009. And it was stable over this period. Declined slightly, then increased significantly, and then declined. This is indicating that we will, but there's been a general increase. And it pull from here to here, worst case scenario. Actually, right? And presenting central tendencies without verbiage. Like I said, presenting the mean alone doesn't make sense. It's not going to give the reader the actual spread of the data and the variability, right? So let's say um, Let me do an example. Let's say you have a mean of 50, right? Mean of 50. Standard deviation of 3, right? You have this data set as waveform, and you present the mean only 50. On average, let's say um, income 50,000, right? Income. And it's also income, average income 50,000. And in your presentation, you just say on average income of 50,000 without presenting standard deviation. You haven't given the reader enough information there. The reader doesn't have anything to work with. All they know is that average income is 50,000. Let us look at if you present the standard deviation. What that means, the standard deviation is 3. What this means, right? That the mean plus or minus 1 standard deviation, right, would be equal to 50 minus, let's say it's 300, 1, right? Let's see that one. Let's say 3,000. Right? So equal this minus this, right? Um, equal this minus this minus. That's 2 standard deviation, right? And equal mean minus this minus minus. I could have done it a different, right? So the mean minus, right, minus 1 SD, right? Ah, um, minus minus 1 SD, 3 minus 2 SD, and this. Have you seen that? Are you seeing it?
Little bit.
Minus 3 SD, right? Yeah.
Sure.
So the mean minus 1 SD is 47, 2 SD is 44, and 3 SD is 41 equal this plus 1 SD. Right?
Mhm.
This plus plus 2 SD and this plus plus 3 SD. Right? When you present, what can we say here? Remember, in the previous thing, we could have only said average income was 50,000.
Mhm.
Here, we present a standard deviation of 3,000. What we present here is that the range of income, right, range between the 1,000, right,
Mhm.
and
59.
59,000, right? That's what this really means, right? So notice this is the reason why you present. And remember, the mean can only be presented for symmetrical distribution. And for a symmetrical distribution, one in class, I think we showed you, you have to be able for you have to be able for the can do the bell curve is like this, right? No, absolutely not. Right. Bell curve is like something like that. Right. Where the mean would be here, yeah, and we will have the standard deviation. This will be one standard deviation, two standard deviation, three standard deviation, right? Below and above, this is below minus two. So this side bigger. So one standard, three standard deviation. We'll have, you have to give my attempt, right? All right. This would be one. So what negative, right? The mean plus or minus one standard deviation plus symmetrical curve will give you 68% of your data set, right? Right? So we can say, we can use this. This will give you here and here, right? It will give you 95%. And three standard, the whole thing will give you 99.9%, right? Now we can use it. So basically, because so what we used to be, so we said the mean plus or minus three standard deviation, right? Means that the data, the income for this grouping lies between 41,000 and 59,000, right? 99.9 meaning everybody, right? But we can go further than that. We can say, right? Let's say, so this is 19. Let's look at two standard deviation, right? What can we conclude from that? 95%. 95%, right, of the people born between 44,000 and 50,000. And if we use one standard deviation, how we say? We can say
It's 68 people.
68% or between 5. So you see how just presenting standard deviation allows a lot more interpretation, right, than just presenting. But we can present the mean and we can say, we can lie and say, okay, average equals 50,000. Everybody getting 50,000. No, no. If you present the standard deviation, notice that some people get in 41, right? Some get in 44, some get in 47, plus others get in 59. Yeah. So that is how you can lie the data by not presenting the measure of central tendency with the measure of variability. You present that, then once you present me with standard deviation, that kind of analysis will choose. Make sense?
Yep.
Good. So we're done with that. We're looking at writing now, academic writing. Right? Academic writing requires you to write in a particular way. You must cite your sources, you must format your document properly, and you must put in your reference if you're using it. We are assuming that So that's how the schools use in 70s, right? And why academic writing is important. They don't want to plagiarize. So what is plagiarism, right? Here you have a list of what is plagiarism, and I'm sure you can relate to you doing any of this intentionally, as people do really go cheap, or unintentionally, when you fail to give credit for the information that did not originate in your brain, consider plagiarism. Right? Same thing with music. You guys eat, right, or replicate somebody music from the 1940s and make it their own here. And then there's a lawsuit, right? You guys up to Drake and somebody else, big lawsuit about Drake for podium in hip hop. They're in a lawsuit about who stole which part of whose song. And every now and then you have these lawsuits about this. So now there are lawsuits, well, they haven't gone fully into lawsuit now. But you know that they're producing songs using AI,
Mm.
right? And you don't know, right? You can't decipher the difference, right? So that's because copyright is a big issue, right?
Yeah.
Well, when you do this, you're infringing with somebody's copyright, right?
Mm.
In the book, the book, the articles, as your consultant, copyright. When you use the something as if it's your own,
Or
without
somebody else.
cite, right? Right? In other words, giving credence, then you're plagiarizing. If you use direct code without quotation mark, that's incorrect, and you're also plagiarizing. In other words, you take verbatim of the book or the article, right? You recognize that you're taking it from the article by citing, but because it's verbatim, you need to put inverted commas in front. Yeah. And when you're citing the application, when you like the issue here is to be transparent in terms of where you got the stuff from, right? Um, and so sometimes you see in writing a um, lot of quotation, right? That in itself, although not plagiarism, depending on it, correct. You're not doing any analysis. There's you in there. All you're doing is looking what somebody else said. I don't get it.
Mm.
So we don't want that kind of you want to analyze.
Sure.
When you paraphrase it without citing it, what is paraphrasing? You take,
Using parts.
yeah, take parts and you start changing the words in the part. But it's still easy, basically.
So you can know when somebody else is using uh, stuffs from somebody else, but that person knows that somebody else is using it.
Well, in order to protect intellectual property, right? That is what that is sort of a universal um, knowledge transfer educational institution. So, Floridating, for example, was developed to protect people, not for money or because you wouldn't know when somebody's stealing your stuff,
Mm,
but it's intellectual property, it's
ethical.
called ethical, it's scholarly writing, right? And the issue when you go into school or classes or college, university, is when you come out of there, you know, to do writing, right?
Hmm.
So the whole issue is avoid plagiarism, and that's why all colleges, even high school, right? High school in Toronto here, and in Ontario, plagiarism is a big issue, yeah, right? And they teach you from there,
Nice.
right? And they have different conventions. Like you have AP, you have MLA, Chicago School, several, right? Um, I think APA stands for American Publishing Association, the 70 editions in circulation, and it provides guidance on citing, formatting, citing, and reference. And I give you the website where you can get it. All we're doing. Thank you. So, on that. Here's some example. Why do you need to cite? Right? We talked about plagiarism, and we indicate that merely changing the words in someone else's work is still plagiarism. In other words, paraphrasing. Right? So to avoid plagiarism, these things have been proposed. Yeah. The MLAs, the APA, Chicago Convention, right? Um, we have, and they're all based on the Harvard system citation, all of them, right? Where for in-text citation, you provide the author's surname and the year of publication in text, in the text itself, right? And then you have a reference list, right, where you will detail the sources. Now, each one of the different conventions will follow this rule. It's not that they do it different, right? Some will allow you to put in numbers, right, and then put at the end. Some will allow you to put numbers. But all of them require you that in the text, you must have the author and a reference, right? And the APA, especially APA guidelines, are very um, in I showed you, I indicate you can use bibliography instead of reference simply because I don't know if you know what this. Bibliography means that anything that you
Use.
consulted, what the reference is that if it's not cited, you can't put
Mm,
right? And what is in the reference must
mm,
be what they do. So here are some examples. I'll find all these examples on the APA website, right? Citing references. First one, right? So if the author's name or naturally in the text when you write it, this is how you will cite it. So for example, Ballerston 1995 in brackets, right? Describe, this is what you're citing, right? That's what he described in his textbook. And you use it. Okay. So in this art, whatever was written about us in 1995, this is where you're paraphrased to the passage, right? Now, I highlighted there in yellow is the actual text in the Balancing book or artwork or whatever. So how you do this? Notice because you're citing, you're putting direct quotes verbatim, right? The exact words of Ballerson you're using. So Ballerson 1995 in brackets, comma, the page number, combine these aspects, defining governance as, and because it's the man exact words you're using, right? You have parenthesis, the exact words, close parenthesis. Yeah, that would be in your writing itself. Now, if the author, and this is where you're naturally it's flowing in your analysis. If the author name does not occur naturally in your text, right, you will give both the name page and page number direct coding correct at the end. So you'll have something like this. When decisions about input, this is your own words you're using, right? And you put person name. That's where you got that. right? And if you are using direct quotation, they put direct quote, and at the end here, you put the reference and the page number. So you can put it at the end, or you can put it up front. Yeah. If you have two authors, right? If you have two authors, you use the same principle as above, APA 7 edition. So let's say you had James and Peter as the authors of an art or a book. And how you would cite them in text, James and Peter is the year, and you indicate what they said. That's your unique. Right? If you have three or more authors, right, um, the APA simplify the process, right? Um, Previously, you have to list all the authors, right? You would list their surname first, right? And then the year of publication. The only way in which they allow you to list, sorry, three or more authors, what you will do is have only one name and et al. And then the year. Et al meaning another. So you put the see when authors are cited in the articles, they have first, second, third, fourth, fifth author. And that's how they list. So in this situation here, for example, oh, this one is Pranon, Chan, Ramirez, Johnson, and these, this is the first author, the main author, and second author, and third author. Right? And you list them like that.
Mhm.
So that is why you could have said, if you had this situation here, right, alone, then you could, this would have been Anand et al. 2019. There are more than three, right? The only way they would want you to present all the authors is if you have some similarities in name. So let us look at these two. In this publication and same year, 2019, you had Fanon, Chan, right? Same persons, right? In this situation here, you have Fanon and Chan also. So you can't indicate Fanon et al. 2019. You don't know which one of these you're talking about, right? So what you will do is put the first three names. So for this one, Fanon, Chan, Ramirez, 2019 would be a distinct article than Fanon, Chan, Montigo, right? So there are different ways in which to present. Um, if you want to select multiple works by one author, so you have one author, right? And he has work in the same year, right? So let's say you had Fanon, um, 2019, yellow 2019, and then again 2019, right? What you will do, you will distinguish publication by alphabet lowercase, right? So you'll have um, A, B, and C. So for example, you will have 2001 A to represent one. In this case, you'll have 2019 A and 2019 B, which means this is one article different from 2019 B. Another, right? If you're citing work, right, like this, so Traveler initial review of Aladio work 2001 is extended and examined in much more detail in his later work in 2001 B, right, and the page number, right? They're the same year, same author, but you have to distinguish 2 years, the same similar year by the work, by the alphabet A and B, and your reference as where you will list of on there. Right? If you're cited articles as no author, as you have a situation like that, right? Then it's citing the text is the first few words of the reference, right? So for example, first few words here, right? And then the title, and then the year. You don't have an author, right? Again here, the book, and or you can write anonymous, the year. Right? So this will be the EPA will give you a lot more detail.
Mm.
If you want to cite a work that has been quoted in another work, right? And then cite both in the text, so you'll have something like an orderly study, Waters 1962, cited by Jones, right? Demonstrated that. In this case, you didn't read Walters, you read Jones, right? But you want to indicate what I said. So only Jones will appear in your references because you never read Walters. Yeah, you don't understand. No, not never read. So I'm saying, yeah. So Jones is what you read and you quote him to say that Waters said this. You never read Waters. So this is how you would cite him, and only Jones will appear in your reference because you never read. If you want to cite a personal communication, if you go and interview someone or talk to someone on the phone and they provide you with information and you want to cite that information in your work, right? Then this is how you would cite it, right? Um, you can put the CEO that told you something about Star Wars, Star Wars, for example. Um, this is the person who told you PRS, personal, COMM dot communication. When did they tell you? 24th of June 1990. Personal communication does not bear a reference. You only cite it. This is the only thing that is cited that does not bear a reference. And that's something somebody told you for me. Let me come to headings, right? You know, in your work, when you're doing it, you say section A, section B, section C, or you can have one, two, three, four, right? You know, in EA heading style, list 5 suggested formatting arrangement, right? You don't have an introduction. In other words, you have an introduction, but you don't have the word introduction. You know, in papers and so on, you use the introduction, background, and then if you use an APA, the word introduction doesn't appear because it is assumed that whatever you have in the first paragraph is your, and this is a new development in the APA 7. So the first part is assumed to be the introduction. Do not label your headings with numbers or letters. Instead, you got the different 5 suggested level and these are them here. These are the formatting style. If you go on to the output, you'll see them. This is level 1, right? This is level 2, level 3, level 4, level 5. What do we mean by these levels? If you use the level 1 heading, that heading will be centered, centered in the page, right? It will be bolded, and whatever you write in there will be in sentence. Yes. What do we mean by that? Depicted here. Each word begins with a capital letter. Right? That's your level 1 here, right? And the text after that will begin with indentation and then the text. In there, anyway. That's level 1, right? Level 2 heading Assume that you had a level one heading already. The level two heading is another section. Flush left, no. That heading will be flush left. State sentence case, right? And bolded. So each, right, should begin with, um, right? And again, after that, you have indentation and the text to start of the paragraph, right? So that's your second level heading. Third level heading assume that you have a first level, you have a second level, you have a third level. These are sections, so we use the difference between the how we denote, how we make a difference between a second level and a third level heading. They're both flush left, they both sentence case, the text start same way, indentation. But the difference between a second level heading and a third level heading is that notice the difference between that and that. This is in italics, right? It's in italics, different from the normal font, right? You guys know how to get italics, right? So the difference between that. So once you see, once you want to do a continuation of your level two, right? You can have a level three, and you distinguish it by indicating italics. It in italics. Level four assume that you have level one, level two, level three, and then level four now will be a part of level three. But then what you have, it will be indented, not centered. Indented, same thing you follow in the sentence case, first letters of each word begin, right? It will end with a period, and your paragraph wording will start right thereafter the period. In these three before, paragraph start on the next line with an indentation. In the foot, you know, it doesn't have a period. It's indented first of all, bolded, sentence case, have a period, and the wording, whatever you're writing about, continue your paragraph. And the fifth level heading, right? Same thing like the fourth level, right? But in this case, the difference is that it's in italics, right? So these are the heading levels. You don't use numbers. You don't use any other stuff. These headings like work for themselves, right? This is just to show you how it can be operationalized in the world. So you have the level one results, right? So we're talking about results, level one. Different type of results. We have spatial type of results. That's level two. And we have kinetics ability type level two. These are the type of results. So those are level two. But within spatial, we had level three, test one, right? And within test one, we had level four, two level four, and a level five, right? So these two level four will describe the type of test, right? And then this level five will describe the type of teacher. So this is related to this, right? And S2 was a level three. We also have S1 was level three, S2 was level. So all of this, right, comes under spatial. And then we can have whatever in the same fashion. But every result here come under result one, right? Under results. So if you're doing something else, right? Um, Analysis in the same chapter. Then analysis will be level one, right? And all the analysis will fall below dependent on whether it's level two, three, four. Of course, these are the standard ones that you use, right? Times Zero, New, Roman, Arial, Georgia, Calibre, and Disney. And these are standard writing tools for that study. And points, 12 points, yeah. We know you get it, right? For example, um, oh, right? This is Georgia 40 font that we're using as the editor. This here, right? It's Arial 8. And we don't change this. We want it to make this 12, then uh, that's a standard writing, right? Times zero. For Arial, we use 11 points. Georgia, 11 points. Apart, well, this is a 4 points, so you can do this. Somebody writing. Here. Running heads, not a biggie. We don't use gladly. So this is your front page, right? And sometimes people like stop on the front page in the head,
Mhm.
you put something there that appears in every page.
Mm,
So that's not acceptable in a report,
okay.
right? So you don't have no running head. And notice, right? There's a here where you type a page. Type a page, enter, bold, author's name, the department, or whichever department you're in there, you might be. It's this, right? Course number, course name, instructor name, assignment due, course your name would be, right? Standard way of presenting. If you have presenting written assignment, this is a cover page, right? And then we come into the end here now. So our reference, right? Purpose of the reference is to provide information necessary to identify and retrieve the sources you have cited in your work. That's why everything you cited must be listed. It's you only list the sources that you use, right? Once you use the reference, right? Not a big level, PA don't use it. It is always done in alphabet or regardless of where and how you cite it, right? It is done in the reference alphabet. So if you cited somebody by the name of Zero, the first page of your report, and somebody by the name of Alpha, in the last page, that's not how it's going to appear in the reference. In the reference, the alpha first, the alphabet,
Mm,
right? And you'll have an hanging in there. I'll show you what I mean in the reference. And as I said, personal communication is not like letters and memorandum and electronic communication, verbal, are not included. They're cited, but they're not included. Right? What do I mean by hanging? Here's an example of a book in your reference section. So you have the reference, the label the reference, of course, level one, bolded and in the middle. And then this is one author example. Fisher is the author. So in the reference, you have Fisher, the initial, the year of the publication, right? And in italics, the name of the book, right? That's your cited. This is a reference book, right? And if the reference goes on to the next page, right? Because you have to put the name of the publisher and hold on the first page, you have to indent that. So this is what we mean by indenting. So this is one reference, right? And that indentation was. So and if you have this was a publication of stage publication. But you could have gotten this reference from the internet, right? So you will reference the internet, HTTP, that's your source of publication, right? If you're looking at a chapter in a book, so sometimes you have a book that is edited, you want to, and you're only looking at that chapter in the book, right? You'll have, for example, the name of the, and you have to list out every author of the 20, right? We show you up. So, in Kumar Young, Usman K, and Usman J, and Powell P, which means that there are only three artists. You have to understand. You have to sign it. The year of the publication, the impact of foreign policy on higher education in Jamaica, but that was not the book. That was a chapter in the book. The book is really P. Mayo editors, educational in small states, global imperative, regional initiative, and local dilemma. And you notice that that's the book, and that is what is going to be in italics. This is a chapter in the book, but you refer to who wrote the chapter, first of all, the date it was written, and where it was found, which page number in the book, and the publishers of the book. Yeah.
Mhm.
If you don't have a publisher that's book and you got a website, then each website will tell you. But the page number still have to be here. If you have a web book, you can have PDF books. Right? When you're looking at periodicals and journals, and not book anymore. Right? There's a different way in which you look at it. So same thing, the name of the author, initials, name of author, initials, two authors. The year of the publication, right? The name, the title of the publication, or the title of the publication here is not in italics. What is in italics is the name of the journal and the volume number, right? That's in italics. Then you have the pages and the website that you got the journal from, right? Journals and periodicals. I don't have. Same thing for the dissertation and thesis, like someone did a doctoral thesis or dissertation or a master's thesis or dissertation, right? So you have the author's name, right? The uh, initial, the year the work was done, because this is unpublished. These are usually unpublished work. Thesis and so on are unpublished. This is the name of the thesis. It was an unpublished doctoral dissertation, and where it was done, University of Boston. And this is dissertation. So when you go on the website and you're trying to reference or cite something, you just put in the you can see under the table of content, and you will find out. And the final thing that we're going to look at is where you have lots of authors, and especially in periodicals and journals, you have like up to something you have up to 20 authors. Right? Those are the persons that came together to do that work.
Mhm.
You will always be listed by the major authors for the others, right? So up to 20 authors are listed. You need to list all of them. Separate the last one. So number 19 and the last one, you have an ampersand, right? And then the year of publication, and you follow the other procedures. If you have more than 20 authors, then you list up to 19 one, put the ampersand, and you put the very last one, and then the year of publication. There's no underline, indentation, quotation mark, and so on. in places or types. Right? So that's it for today. Right? Um, this is not going to accommodate that
All right.
because this is going to be tested when you're actually writing. Yeah, your work. But the rest of the stuff can appear in the exam, especially 5 and 6. Right? And we did of some of this stuff, right? Um, in 6 also, right? Box, plot, and so a lot of 5 and 6 will be appearing here, right? The exam has 2, so you'll see, and I'm sure you saw this in previous course. Um, this question will be pulled from here, and you click on that, and you get a list of questions. So you have to do, you will select, the computer will do it. So the name will be 25 question, and you randomly give it. So you may not get the same question for some person may receive.
Okay.
And in another set, you'll have to do 2 of the 5 same thing, you will point at random. But because of that, it may give you the same thing. So for example, you may have um, calculating correlation coefficient. And then you may have another question which is calculating correlation, right?
Yeah.
Or you may have another question which says, um, I'm not doing that. But if you get one question, you answer it, and you get another question, same type of question, and answer it too, because you don't have any option. That's 2 out of 5. But I just want to indicate to you how the correlation question can go. Remember this? This is in class 5, right? Where you use the formula, right?
Mhm.
So you give me some, you're given this information, right? And you can do this. Or you can be given information like this.
And we have to complete.
Complete the table. And then use the formula, find the correlation, and it drops.
Mhm.
But you have the formula.
Yeah.
Right? Um,
Is this Wednesday or is the next one?
this one. And the other one that can come like this is box.
All right.
And you have the assignment that you can do a practice. Right? It's almost like
Okay.
here's this information, draw block of what you do Excel, right? And indicate where's the medium, part-time,
All right.
which is question 6. At the assignment, the report, you do that assignment. And you're gonna gain twice. You're gonna gain with marks, and you gain exam,
Got
right?
it.
And you can have something like this. Right? So you have it already and you know where what to do with it.